Welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Trevor Lane again with Lakers Nation. Trevor, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, so what's new with the Lakers overall for maybe people that are kind of just following it from a little bit of a distance?
Oh man, I mean, what isn't new at this point? There's a million things going on in the world of the Los Angeles Lakers, which is, I mean, I guess that's always the case pretty much. But I mean, you got free agency coming up, the Lakers landing the 4th pick in the draft. You've got the turmoil within the front office, all these things. Kyle Kuzma just got selected to the USA team, so you've got all kinds of things that are happening right now. Even though the Lakers aren't playing, I feel like this is an even busier time of year than when games are actually on for the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the Kuzma news, that really, I guess I just don't fully understand like what exactly. So is he going to be playing in the 2020 Olympics? Potentially?
He could be, like, they're bringing him into camp, so that's something where, like, if he outperforms some of the other guys, which obviously there's so much bigger names around than his, if he outperforms some guys, then potentially. But I think this is more of and this is just me personally saying this, but I think this is more of a thing where they're trying to get in some young players to kind of build them up through the system. You see the same thing in soccer. Okay, when you see, like, the United States men's soccer team is getting ready for the Gold Cup, the women's team is getting ready for the Women's World Cup. And so you'll see young players brought into camp where you know that when they do the final roster cut down, they're not going to be there, but they're at least brought in so they're familiar with the system, and you can start them on the process, and they get that experience of playing against guys who are and girls in the women's team who have been there and done it before. And I think that's kind of what's going on here with Kuzma, because you look at these names that he's with. I mean, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum and Bradley Beal and players like that are going to be there playing to go along with Anthony Davis, Kemba Walker, James Harden, all these star level players. Now, that's not to say that Kuzma couldn't come in and play well. Look, we saw it like Kenneth Faried had a starting role. What was that, 5 years ago or so, maybe less, when he was with the team. So you never know. FIBA play is a little bit different than NBA play. It's possible that Kuzma's floor spacing works really well at this level. Olympic Carmelo Anthony was a thing because he had the ability to do that. So who knows? Maybe he's a perfect fit, but I tend to look at it more as it's bringing him in to get him used to the program, and then he'll be there in the future.
Out of Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo Ball, which one do you think is most likely to like have a starting position on an Olympic team? Like, so I guess let's say the 2024 Olympics. Mm-hmm. Which of those three do you think is most likely to be a starter on that team?
Oh gosh, looking at their skill sets, I could see where you could make the argument for Kuzma simply because of his versatility. He can really play in a number of different ways. I mean, they're all versatile in their own way. You have to be able to shoot, and I think Ingram's shooting ability has been a little bit shaky, but still top end talent. I think I got to go Ingram just because I think he has the highest ceiling of them, and so I'll go with him. But I could see where Kuzma's game would translate really, really well to FIBA.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about the whole front office and all the problems that they've had. Now, I mean, I think the last time we spoke, I mentioned that I'm not really a gigantic fan of Jeannie Buss's, I guess, ownership position so far, but I feel like, to be honest, since Magic stepped away, I think, what was that, April 9th or whatever it was, or towards the middle of April, I feel like the Lakers have actually made a lot of really smart decisions. I don't know. I mean, like, I like so far what they're doing with the coaching staff. I liked the hiring of, what was her name, Judy Sato?
Yes, yeah.
As the medical staff. I mean, obviously, it's great that we got the 4th pick coming up, but I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about the front office right now? I mean, I know that like ESPN and, Fox Sports News, I know that they love slamming the Lakers' front office, but is it actually as horrible as they're saying? Or, what are your opinions?
Yes and no. So when you look at the situation, you've got the Lakers who have struggled, right? I mean, their front office situation has been a mess because nobody knew who was in charge, and they haven't come out and said who was in charge until Frank Vogel's press conference. Rob Pelinka made some comments, basically said that he's running the show, and then he gets the okay from Jeannie when they're making major moves. In fact, I think he said he gets her blessing. So Jeannie ultimately makes the decisions. But if you look at the way things have gone, I have no problem with Frank Vogel as a head coach. I think he's a good coach. I think he was the best coach available at the time. But you look at how they got to him, and they botched that whole process. I mean, going to Ty Lue, giving him a lowball offer, and trying to tether his contract to LeBron James. And then even with Vogel, you've brought him in. He was willing to take the 3-year deal that Ty Lue was not, which that's fine. But then you also saddled him with Jason Kidd, who we know is going to want the head coaching job. The Lakers made him the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA, which tends to suggest they actually see him as more of a head coach. And so what kind of a dynamic are you creating there? Well, Vogel is constantly looking over his shoulder at Kidd. Who knows? Maybe they work together just fine. Lionel Hollins, bringing him as an assistant coach, that's fine. But again, his strength is defense more so than offense. So they really need to bring in a true offensive mind with whoever else they hire to this coaching staff. I think it's not as bad as people portray it. People make this out to be awful, and free agents will be crazy to go there. And I don't think the situation is nearly as toxic as people seem to make it out to be. But at the same time, I don't think that this has been a very clean transition. I think it's been very messy, and a lot of that has been self-inflicted.
I think you're totally right. I mean, from everything that, I see you guys put out, or other, Lakers-centric media sites, I mean, it seems like, yeah, it does seem very messy, but I don't know. At the same time, I'm kind of liking the end results, though. It's very strange because, on the one hand, I would rather have Frank Vogel, Hollins, and Kidd as the coaching staff rather than Luke Walton and who he had. So, I mean, I'm glad about that, but I don't know. I mean, it does seem to be like overly messy for no reason, kind of like what you're saying. I mean, it seems very convoluted how they're getting to these positions, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I look at it and I think to myself, everyone in the, the like big media, sports media, they're always praising the same people. It's, oh my gosh, like Daryl Morey. I mean, he's a genius. So look at this and that. And I think to myself, well, I don't know. What has he done? I mean, he's lost to the Warriors 4 out of 5 seasons straight. Or, like Masai Ujiri, it's like, okay, he took a quote gamble on Kawhi Leonard. And I think to myself, what was the gamble? Like, DeMar DeRozan is, 28, 29 years old? Well, how was that a gamble, trading him for Kawhi Leonard? I mean, would you even want DeMar DeRozan anyways 2 years from now? So, I don't know. I just feel like the media, they love talking about who's a really spectacular general manager. And I just feel like to myself, well, I mean, yeah, is Rob Pelinka a good one? I mean, so far, I think he had one good season, one bad season as a general manager, but I think it's too soon to say that these other people are just brilliant and they're just so great. And, Rob Pelinka is, Rob Lowe's evil twin or something.
Well, I think it comes down to expectations, right? So you look at Rob Pelinka and what he's done heading into last summer. He and Magic both had super high expectations the moment LeBron signed, and then they instantly followed that up with all those questionable signings: Lance Stevenson, Rajon Rondo, JaVale, who played just fine, but Michael Beasley, letting Brook Lopez go and thinking that Beasley was going to replace what he did or replace Randall's role as a small ball 5. There were all kinds of issues there, so that was certainly a problem, right? They didn't fulfill expectations. The thought was that they would bring in shooters, and they didn't do those things. They went the exact opposite and ended up being a nightmare. And then on the flip side, you look at guys like Morey or Masai Ujiri, right? Was anybody saying, oh, the Raptors are a lock to make it to the finals? No. But flipping DeRozan for Kawhi, obviously on the surface, you say yes all day, every day, but Kawhi is also going to be a free agent. And so you're losing that team control that you had over DeRozan. And you could say, hey, the Raptors can tear it down now. If Kawhi does end up leaving, they can get rid of Lowry. They can find homes for some of these other players, and they can rebuild. So that gives them a new situation. But then part of the way through the season, he was able to flip some assets and get Marc Gasol. And so you look at moves like that. They're taking minimal assets or positions where it doesn't look like they're able to make a move, and then they're doing smart things with it. Daryl Morey never really had a high pick to rebuild his team with. They were always kind of a middling team, and even though they were on the treadmill, he still found a way to go get James Harden and then rebuild the team from there and go build a true contender. So when you look at guys like that compared to what Pelinka has done, those guys kind of overachieved, right? They outperformed their expectations, whereas you had Pelinka who underachieved. And so I think in public perception, that makes all the difference.
One thing I guess was kind of in the news maybe last week, or it was, at least I saw it on Twitter, was this idea of Chris Paul going to the Lakers or being traded to the Lakers. I mean, is that, like, let's say if you're not trading LeBron James straight up for Chris Paul, I mean, how is it even financially possible to trade Chris Paul for, even if we wanted to trade every young asset we had, would the salaries even match then or no?
Well, okay, so first of all, I mean, like the Chris Paul thing, that's got Lakers fans. Like, you've seen the this is fine meme that's out there, where everything is really on fire. Like, that will be Lakers fans if they trade for Chris Paul, because that contract is absolutely toxic. It's horrendous, and it's something that I think no team's going to really want to pay. But in terms of just, is it financially feasible? Yes, Chris Paul is going to make $38.5 million next season. And that's the point where the Lakers would have cap room. Because they have cap space, they're going to have right around 32-ish, give or take, depending on where the cap actually winds up. In space to deal with. So if, in theory, if you were to take a contract like, say, Lonzo Ball, who's making $8 million, and then you were to send him for Chris Paul, and then just absorb the remainder of Paul's salary, that difference, so that $30 million you could just absorb into your cap space, and then you have no cap room to go chase anybody else, and your team is LeBron James and Chris Paul, and you've given up Lonzo Ball, which obviously you don't do. I wouldn't even take Chris Paul for free. I wouldn't even just absorb him into my cap space. Like I would not do that. But I'm just saying, financially, under the cap, it is possible to do it, but it would not be a smart thing at all.
I remember when I saw Chris Paul, when it was announced that he signed the contract, whenever it was, I forgot if it was July 2nd or whatever day it exactly was. I remember telling a friend, I was like, man, that sounds like it's the worst contract in basketball today. Like, I was thinking, like, why so much money? Like, it just seems such a large amount. And the years, I mean, I just thought, wow, like, this is a lot of money. And then lo and behold, this year kind of started to prove that fact. And yeah, I don't know, going forward, I mean, I was thinking about that too. Like, where could Chris Paul even go? Like, who would actually even want to trade for him? Like, I mean, I know Morey said that, he's willing to trade everybody on the team, but I mean, where could you send Chris Paul? I mean, it'd have to be a team that, wants to win now, but has $38 million able to move. And I don't know. I mean, where could he even go, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to find a suitor for him. You'd be looking for a team that wants to win right now, because I do still think, look, if Chris Paul was making $5 million, absolutely take him in a heartbeat, right? Like, he still can produce on the floor. He's injured a lot and everything. The problem isn't the player. It's not that he just can't play basketball anymore. It's not that he doesn't have skill as a player. It's the contract. So if you were to find a team that has a similarly bad contract, and you're not going to find somebody that's, well, I guess like John Wall or something like that, but obviously that's an even worse contract than Chris Paul's. But if you were to find a team that has maybe a couple of big contracts that are negative, you think about, say the Minnesota Timberwolves have Gorgie Jang, and say they were to attach a couple of other salaries, and I haven't looked at their salary cap sheet, so I don't know exactly how they can make it work. But you look for that kind of team, the team that thinks that they are one player away from really making a push. And that's who I'd be looking at if there is a trade to be had. But again, if you're the Rockets and your team is contending right now, is your priority to just move that money, or is your priority to get better? Because it's unlikely, without attaching a bunch of assets to Chris Paul, that you're improving your team in the here and now by trading him. On the flip side, if you're trying to shed money, well, then you're probably not improving your team right now. You're going to be worse than if you just hung on to Chris Paul. So it's a really tricky situation. It's a terrible contract, but at the same time, the Rockets were kind of stuck. They're an over the cap team. And so it's not like if they had let Chris Paul walk, they couldn't go replace him. They couldn't go find somebody else because they were over the salary cap. It would have been really difficult for them to go do that. So a similar scenario with, say, the Philadelphia 76ers with Jimmy Butler this summer. If they just let him walk away and they don't give him that supermax deal for 5 years, then you can't really go replace him with anyone else. I mean, you can find some minimum guys, or you could use an exception or something like that, but you're not going to find anyone comparable. So sometimes you're better off just paying the guy and understanding that it'll be probably a negative contract for a few years, rather than weaken your team by just letting him walk away. And that's just the nature of the beast, the way the CBA works.
If you were the Raptors or the Bucks, would you consider trading for Chris Paul? Like, would you trade Kyle Lowry for Chris Paul, or would you trade Eric Bledsoe and whatever else would to match the salaries? But would you trade Eric Bledsoe or Kyle Lowry for Chris Paul, or do you think that they're both better than him?
Again, I think next season I'd have more faith, even though he's got an injury history. I've got more faith in Eric Bledsoe just because he's younger than Chris Paul. But with the Raptors, if that's the piece, that if you go to Kawhi and say, hey, if we bring in Chris Paul, will you stay? And he says yes, then you do it, right? I mean, there's no question there. It would depend on how it plays into the whole Kawhi decision. So I don't like, if Kawhi leaves, then obviously you don't do it. So I think that's the big factor here. In a vacuum, without those other things, I would not do it if I was the Raptors. I wouldn't do it if I was the Bucks, just because you're taking on that long-term salary. And I know Bledsoe's deal goes for a few more years, but he's making, gosh, I think it's less than half. I'd have to pull up their sheets, but just given the bang for your buck, I'd rather have Bledsoe, and I'd rather have Lowry, who's actually going to make $30 million, but his deal expires next year, than have Chris Paul locked up for, what is it now, 3 more seasons after this one, and he's making $38 million, $41 million, and $44 million in those seasons as he's going to be heading into his late 30s. That's scary.
Man, that is a terrible contract. To get back a little bit to the Lakers, so I know everybody is just obsessed with the Lakers offseason. I mean, at least I think about it all the time. Like, oh, what if this happens or what if that happens? But I wanted to ask you just a couple maybe more like rapid fire type questions. Mm-hmm. So the first one I want to ask is, what would you like to happen? The second one is, what do you think is going to happen? And then what can happen? So you can answer that in any order, but I guess we can start off with, what would you like to act like? What's a realistic possibility that you could see for Lakers this offseason?
Okay, yeah, let's start there, then we'll get into the other one. So what I would like to see happen in an ideal situation for Lakers fans would play out with them getting a free agent. Okay, a max level free agent, and that's critical because if you're getting a free agent, say you're getting, it can be Jimmy Butler, Kyrie Irving, Kawhi Leonard, whoever it is, whichever one of those guys that you get, if you're able to get one of them, then that means that you're doing it without having to surrender any assets aside from just cap space. So that's huge. You're giving up just straight cap in exchange for that player. We hear all about the Anthony Davis trade talks and everything, and the downside to doing that or going after a guy like Bradley Beal is you're parting with, say, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, some of your young pieces, your number 4 pick. You're parting with assets in order to bring that player in. So just bringing in a player via cap space is far preferable to actually making a trade. And then from there, you can figure things out. Okay, once you've got that free agent in, then you can kind of work around it and figure out, okay, if we bring in Jimmy Butler, do we think a team with Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, and then you keep Lonzo, Kuzma, Ingram, and then whoever we draft it for, whether that's Darius Garland or Jarrett Culver or whoever it is, DeAndre Hunter, is that team good enough? And if not, then you can say, okay, well, if we move these 2 young assets, if we move Kuzma and Ingram, does that get us this guy? Right? And then you can start exploring the trade market. The flip side to it is that they may actually need to explore a trade before free agency in order to attract a free agent. So if, say, you want to go get Jimmy Butler and Jimmy Butler says, well, I think we need another piece, and you can swing a deal of the number 4 pick and Ingram and whatever, you try to make the salaries work and you go get, say, a Bradley Beal or somebody like that, and then that causes a free agent to sign with you. I think that's another dynamic to the whole situation, but ultimately you want to be able to use this cap space that the Lakers have saved up, this 32+ million that they've got, in order to make some sort of free agent come to you without having to surrender assets for them. That's the ideal scenario, and not just getting an Anthony Davis. I think the goal for the Lakers has always been to be a major player on the free agent market, and so it'll be a little bit of a letdown if they're forced to trade to bring in a star and then they can't get anyone else, as opposed to just landing someone in free agency.
So what do you think is most most likely to happen? Like, if you had to guess, by, whatever, the beginning of the season, what do you think is the most likely outcome from this season? At least right now, just kind of your feeling.
Gosh, I mean, it really depends on whether the players see things the same way as the media does. And JaVale McGee was on Undisputed today, and he actually had a comment. I posted it to Instagram, where he was saying that people are overestimating or overanalyzing, he said, how easy it will be for the Lakers to go land a free agent. So if free agents look at the Lakers and they see a mess the way right now the media does, they're probably not going to get anybody. And then you're probably forced to make a trade in order to appease LeBron, in order to bring in Beal or whoever. So I could see some parts of the young core being gone, and I think they may be gone regardless. I think maybe they'll make a trade even if they don't land somebody. But I think that at the end of the day, it's Los Angeles. There's cap space. There's LeBron James. There's young talent. I think they're going to land somebody. I keep going back to Jimmy Butler. I wonder if he's going to be the piece, but I think they're going to get a free agent. So I think that is likely. And then I think from there, it's also likely that they'll move at least one of the young players in order to get some sort of win now piece, and possibly a young player and that number 4 overall pick.
Is it possible? I mean, again, I don't really know all the financials of, NBA, so I'm not 100% sure about all the contracts and things like that. But is it possible that by, let's say, the playoffs next season, could there be a starting lineup of, let's say, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram? Or is that too unfeasible? Or, I mean, I guess if that was going to be the starting lineup for the playoffs, would that have to be like a mid-season trade where, we sign a player like a Marcus Morris or whoever, and then we trade a mid-season with assets to get Davis? I mean, is that something possible? Or
let me think about that second scenario there. This summer, no, it's not possible. So, and the reason for that is that if you're going to sign Kyrie, let's say, because the order of operations matters here. So let's say you sign Kyrie as a free agent to take you up to the cap. Okay, so then you're at the cap. You no longer have money to go out after Davis. You have to get to within 125% of his salary, which means you probably have to include both Ingram and Lonzo. There's a slim possibility you can just barely make it where you do one of the two of them. You can do like Ingram plus Kuzma plus Hart plus Mo Wagner plus Isaac Bonga and all these pieces put together. Plus you have to sign your number 4 draft pick. So let's say they draft DeAndre Hunter, just for the hypothetical, and you sign him, you wait 30 days, and then you include him because you have to wait 30 days to include him in a trade package once you sign him. So you include his $7 million in the trade package for Anthony Davis. Then you could do it. You could have both of them and still hang on to like a Lonzo Ball or somebody like that. But with Ingram in there as well, there's no way to financially make that work. You would have to give up. You'd have to give up one or the other of Lonzo or Ingram, and that would be the decision the Lakers would have to make. As far as signing a bunch of contracts, say you sign a bunch of one-year deals, in theory, maybe you could, but you would still have Lonzo and Ingram on the books. It would make it really tough to do. And matching that salary, I think you would still have to part with, even if you signed some guys like a Marcus Morris or something, although you would get him for maybe the room exception. So maybe that would be a factor. I'd have to crunch all the numbers, but my gut would be no, that you'd still have to part with one of Ingram or Lonzo in order to get that done.
So I guess then, I mean, in your opinion, let's say if the Lakers, let's say they were able to land like a Kyrie Irving or Kawhi Leonard, if you mix that with LeBron plus the young core plus, like we just mentioned, Marcus Morris type player, or Paul Millsap, let's say if he decides to leave, or whoever, Trevor Ariza, Danny Green, those type of players. I mean, what would you think of that team? I mean, is that team a possible title contender if it's, let's say, Kawhi, LeBron, and let's say, Brandon Ingram continues to play like how he was before, he had his blood clots, and let's say everybody gets better and then you have those role players. I mean, is that a title contender in your opinion, or do you think that falls just short?
I mean, I would think it would fall a little bit short, but these are young players that are growing. I'm really excited to see what Lonzo is after this summer. You remember last summer he was injured, and so he didn't get to train at all over the summer, really. So all the things in his game that he needed to work on didn't get done last summer. So this summer now he's finally able to actually work on things. So I'm curious to see what he's going to look like. Brandon Ingram is continuing to grow as he recovers. What does he become? Kyle Kuzma, we know, is working out with a shooting coach right now, and that was a big part of his issues last season, was that he didn't shoot all that well from outside. And so if he can fix that, if they can all take at least a step forward, each one of the young core, and then you land, say, a Kawhi Leonard, plus you've got LeBron, I don't see any reason why you couldn't say that that's a contending team. Yeah, you'd feel better about that team if it's Kawhi and you go get Anthony Davis, right? Obviously LeBron, AD, Kawhi, like that's a real true contender. Then you go bring in some ring chaser guys and things like that to kind of round out your roster. That would be a big difference. I mean, that's a step up. That's a true contender there. But from the Lakers' perspective, I could see where you could sell yourself on the idea that the young players plus Kawhi plus LeBron could be a really deadly combo. And then in the future, as LeBron phases out, you still have all these young pieces surrounding the younger star, being Kawhi or Kyrie or whoever it is. So I think that it's an intriguing scenario, and it's an enticing one if you can sell yourself on the idea that they are a true contender with those young pieces plus LeBron and another star, which I don't know for sure that they are, but that would be up to the Lakers to decide.
I mean, I think people kind of underestimate even the strength of a fourth pick. I mean, even in recent history, I mean, what, Luka Doncic, didn't he go fifth last year? And Kristaps Porzingis
third.
Oh, he went third? Okay.
Trae Young went 5. They made that swap.
Oh, okay, that's what happened. And then, what was it? Kristaps Porzingis, I know he got drafted at 4, right?
He was 4, yep.
So,
yes, I mean, that's true.
So to act, I mean, I feel like, to this idea, it's like, oh my gosh, the fourth pick, it's total crap and it's only the top 3 that matter. It's like, well, I don't really know if that's 100% true. I mean, it's possible that we could draft a star at 4. I mean, superstars have been drafted at 4 or lower.
Yeah, it happens. And look, in this draft, every draft is different. So from what we've heard, what I've heard from talking to a number of different draft experts, is that the challenge the Lakers have is that at the 4 pick, right now, there's a consensus of who the top 3 is. Okay, you've got RJ Barrett, you've got obviously Zion Williamson, and then John Morant. So those 3 are considered to be more valuable than whoever you can get at 4. And part of the reason for that is because there's this belief that the player you get at 4 could be of the same quality as the player you get at 15. There's a lot of parity in these mid lottery picks, and so that's the challenge for the Lakers. Because of that, whoever you pick at 4, being the first pick of this next tier, if you want to call this tier 3 of the draft, if you have Zion as tier 1 and tier 2 is Ja and RJ Barrett, and then tier 3 having the first pick, if they're all really even, there's a decent chance that somebody who gets picked after is going to wind up being better. Just because there's so many picks coming after where people still see value there. So that's where you wonder if maybe the Lakers trade down or something like that. But just looking at previous drafts, I mean, sure, Jaren Jackson Jr. got selected for last year, and he looks really good for the Memphis Grizzlies. But then you also have, Josh Jackson and Dragon Bender were back-to-back 4 picks for the Phoenix Suns, who didn't turn out so well. Then you've got Porzingis and Aaron Gordon, who are fine. Cody Zeller, Dion Waiters, not so much. Wesley Johnson, who Lakers fans know a little too well, was a number 4 pick. But so was Russell Westbrook and Mike Conley. So it's, Chris Paul was a number 4 pick. So it just depends on the draft, and it's very much a crapshoot. It's going to be up to the Lakers scouting department, who has done really, really well historically, to figure out, is there a star there? And if not, what kind of value can they extract from that pick? Is it worth it to get somebody that you think is just going to be a role player there, knowing the salary that's attached to it, or do you then move that pick? It's going to be really fascinating here. I think that the trade talks are going to heat up as we get closer and closer to the draft, and we very well could see that pick on the move. But at the same time, at this point, the Lakers scouting department has done so well, you kind of just have to give them the benefit of the doubt.
One last topic that I wanted to cover with you real quick is I remember last time we spoke, we talked about Colin Cowherd talking about a shadow executive running the Lakers, and I just feel like, I don't know what's been up with Cowherd recently, but I feel like he's got some very bad takes recently. Like, I think, what was it, yesterday? Didn't he have a little segment where he said something like along the lines of, LeBron James has gone 0 dark 30 on the Lakers. He's not talking to the Lakers. And then literally there's a photo of LeBron with Frank Vogel at the facility. I guess, I mean, have there been just some really bad takes that you've seen from the mainstream sports media over the last couple months? Or just, I mean, is it Cowherd? Is he just in particularly terrible right now? Or what the heck is happening with that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that wasn't a great take. If you follow LeBron on Instagram, he has posted stuff from the Lakers workout facility, right? He's been there working out. preparing for next season. He was at the introductory press conference for Frank Vogel. He showed up for Jarrett Culver's pre-draft workout. So yeah, he's definitely been around. He's not gone zero dark 30 on the Lakers. He's not MIA. It's not like they can't find him or anything. Like, oh gosh, I think it was last summer when the Knicks had no idea where Porzingis was and hadn't talked to him in like 2 months or something like that. So it's not a situation like that. But I think there's just so much negativity around the Lakers that somebody probably says something like that, and it just sounds right. I mean, given how crazy things have been and how things have been mismanaged, so it just seems like that's what's in the air. And so I don't know if maybe that was just Coward was uninformed or whatever. I will say that there's been a little bit of a pushback recently in the last, I would say 3-4 days, where I've seen a few more positive articles and a few more positive takes on the Lakers and their situation. There's kind of ebbs and flows to this. So as this kind of negative swarm hits, there's going to be a natural pushback of saying, hey, wait, maybe it's not quite as bad as everybody says. And so we've seen that coming. And so that, I think Coward's take kind of came right in the middle of that pushback a little bit towards the negativity. So it especially stood out like, hey, what, you're just making stuff up now at this point, man. It's just incorrect. So yeah, I mean, long story short, it's been tough for the Lakers. I don't really know if people are just trying to pile on them, but the bottom line is the Lakers sell, right? The Lakers sell whatever. The NBA finals are starting, and the top story has been the Lakers, right? As that started up, and yeah, the finals have been great, and they've been well played games and all of that, but the bottom line is that the Lakers are still the big topic in the NBA. They're not even playing games, and that comes with it its own set of challenges in terms of media coverage, but it's also a testament to just how big and powerful this franchise is, and it's a positive thing in that way too.
All right, so definitely, I want to ask you real quick just before you go, Trevor, how can we follow all your guys' work online, and how can we follow your stuff?
Sure. So you can follow me personally on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. I'm on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA. And you can follow Lakers Nation on Twitter and Facebook at Lakers Nation. You can follow us on Instagram at Lakers Nation Official. And you can find the Lakers Nation YouTube channel as well, which has been really blowing up lately. So definitely check us out there also.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Trevor, for coming on. Hopefully maybe we can talk sometime in July once all the pieces move and we say, like, oh my gosh, I never thought, the Lakers are going to make a trade for Karl Anthony Towns or whatever the heck happens. We could talk about that then. But yeah, definitely. Thank you again, Trevor, so much for coming on.
Sure. No problem. That sounds good. And thanks so much for having me.